I'm Molly, the Kush RN, and you've reached Conversations with Kush. Tonight, I have an incredible guest, Mr. Clemon Dabney III, better known as Doc Dabs. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Clem has a PhD in Cannabis Molecular Genetics and Genomics. He is the CEO of Doc Dabs Healthy Highs. He is the co-owner of A&D Genetics. He does research, education, product innovation. He contributes as a voice to the Star Tribune. He's an advocate for patients and entrepreneurs and small businesses and cannabis consumers in general. So you have a very long list of accolades, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you for your work and your leadership in this space.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been fun to just serve our community.
Yeah, for sure. I can tell you really get a kick out of it. I see you out at events all the time. You're always having a good time interacting with people. You're so warm and like approachable. And, you know, when people ask you questions, your style is so gentle. You never make anyone feel shamed for like not knowing something, especially me. I think I came to you, I don't know, a couple months back. We were at an event and I'm not really a big dabber, but I'm like trying to develop my cannabis palette, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were like helping me through a dab. And so, yeah, it was really awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. How did you tell me about your life a little bit and, you know, how you kind of got into the cannabis space?
Yeah. So I guess I grew up in Bloomington.
Mm-hmm.
And by my house in Bloomington growing up, there was a river access to the Minnesota River. So I guess we'll Quentin Tarantino this. We'll go back to the beginning. So at St. Bonaventure Catholic Church, I started smoking at communion class. That was like the first place I ever smoked cannabis. And then I found out very quickly that I loved it.
Okay.
And then quickly after that, I ordered some seeds online and then went down to the river and started growing weed down there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess that's where the love of cannabis was inspired.
Yeah.
But I never thought that if I was me, my 18-year-old me thinking about what I was going to do, I don't think I would ever think it was this.
Yeah. Have you always been kind of a science guy then?
I have been. Yeah. So I think when I was younger, I wanted to be a biologist. And then in undergrad, I thought I was going to be a medical doctor. And then then I thought I was going to be like a psychiatrist.
You ran the gamut.
Yeah. Because I was very interested. I studied neuroscience in undergrad. So I was really interested in like how we perceive our world and
Sure.
like how when we were provided a stimulus, how we respond to it.
Nice.
So yeah.
Cannabis fits in pretty well with that.
It does, yeah. So I didn't go too far.
Yeah. What did you learn through like the process of growing, like both, we'll start personally, but I want to hear about how professionally, how that kind of evolved too.
Yeah. So I guess I learned from my grandmother at the beginning. She grew up on a farm in South Dakota. She lived in Bloomington, and she just we always tended her garden together. That was like our thing. So we would pick mint. But once I got to college, I'd pick her mint and make her mint juleps. And
nice.
She would sit in her lawn chair and I would just weed,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd just have conversations about life. So I think a lot of skills and experience in growing plants kind of stems from her.
Okay.
But then I got into it more after college. So in undergrad, I had to raise rats and then harvest their brains, and that was just too much for me. So I took some time and worked at Normandale Community College in the biology lab there.
Cool.
And then met this Dr. Joseph McCulloch, who was a plant botanist, I guess. And he was like, man, you should really think about, keeping up with science, I guess.
Yeah.
And then that kind of like sprung the idea of like, hey, I can kill plants for data.
Yeah.
And then I started a master's of professional studies in horticulture, which is like a pay to play master's.
Yeah.
And then after my first semester, I transferred into a real master's of science because I just didn't have the plant background.
Sure.
But after that semester, I networked and started a real master's in plant breeding and molecular genetics.
Yeah. I saw you talking, maybe it was with Marcus on Northern Lights, and you talked about how like who do you talk to when you go and you want to study cannabis. So what was that process like? Did you get a lot of pushback from people, or people like, what? Like
it wasn't really a thing yet.
Okay, cool.
So so there was a guy at the University of Minnesota, Dr. George Weiblin, So I was the vice president of the horticulture club. I reached out to him to give a speech about cannabis genetics.
Mm.
It went well. We packed the house. And then after it, we kind of like vibed after.
Yeah.
And he was just like, I don't ever take on people to work for me who are interested in cannabis. And I was just like, if I ever worked for you, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then didn't hear from him. I was finishing up. I was about to defend my master's, and he hit me up and was like, I got some funding. Do you want to be my student and submit a white paper? And now I'm here.
Nice. That's what's up.
So it's just kind of right place, right time,
Yeah.
right skill set.
What's your project about then?
When I worked for him?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did like a bunch of stuff outside of my thesis. So we worked with Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate to like we started the process of breeding them a fiber variety, because they have this thing called Dakota Industries. It's a bone plastic bag facility.
Cool.
So they make like the bags you'd find in a Walmart, like the garbage bags that Walmart uses, or
Sure.
Starbucks.
Yeah. Like a heavy duty one.
The heavy duty ones, or the little trash bin ones. And they wanted to make that process more sustainable by incorporating hemp fiber into it.
Cool.
So we kind of did like a business plan with them and tried working with them to like figure out how much hemp we could get into the bags, because they use like a polylactic acid pellet. And I guess my thesis was mainly on, we created and worked on a cannabis genome project. So we have like at the time it was the most highly resolved cannabis genome. It's like the standard for NCBI. I did like a marker validation study. So we had this marker that we could see if a plant produces THC or CBD or both. So we took a feral population. We made what you call a test cross and breeding. We validated it in that population, took it into a population we got from the National Institute of Drug Abuse from Ole Miss University.
Right.
And then we also looked at, I think it was 10 or 12 Canadian certified hemp varieties.
Okay. Nice.
Okay.
Is that industry, the hemp part for like industrial purposes, is that flourishing here? What is it like? I really don't know that much about it.
I think for the hemp fiber, I think it's still kind of in its infancy, because the tricky part with hemp fiber is it's easy to grow. Sure. Like we have good climate for it in the state. The problem is we lack the infrastructure. Right. Because hemp fiber, it's a product that needs to happen at scale. Okay. So you really need at least $3 million, probably 10 to make it successful. Okay. And I think that there's just not enough players with that kind of money. Not that many Minnesota farmers have that kind of money to play around with and gamble. Yeah, right. Because it has to end up in something like those plastic bags, or like a large clothing brand or a large car company.
So you need to have kind of an end product in mind before you get started.
Exactly, because even the machinery itself, like the decorticator, is set up for that end product. So you really have to know what that end product is, and you have to be able to sell it.
Yeah. The reason why I ask is because I feel like there's not enough thought into like the different things people can do in cannabis. Like it's big and sexy to have like a retail spot and a dispensary and maybe even to grow, but like, there's so many other jobs that people can do. Like this industry is going to be $1 billion industry, and like there's jobs everywhere for people. So
yeah, exactly. I think that I think that's the one thing that I've seen and noticed from my time in the industry is like, I think there's a lot of people that want to do everything. And it's just like, what are you good at? Yeah, exactly. What do you want to spend the next 20 or 30 years doing? Yeah. And I think that like there's space for that. Yeah. Because we're here in this podcast studio, and we've got somebody chopping the podcast up, and it's cannabis related. Exactly. So it's just like there's marketing, there's every facet, packaging, design, online creation. I think there's this like, what are you good at, and do you like the cannabis industry? Right. And I think like fit there.
Yeah, live your passion, right? That's one thing that I've observed about you. As I said earlier, like I see you out at events, you're having a good time. Like I've heard you talk about like the products that you've created and how like you're just always trying to make something that you like, right? That makes sense. So just kind of shifting into innovation then, tell me how like Doc Dabs was born and what's that all about?
Yeah, so I guess Doc Dabs was born. I used to have this company. I guess I still do have this company, A&D Genetics. Okay. So it's like we were growing hemp in Scandia at Poplar Hills Goat Dairy and making hemp-infused products, I guess. tinctures and honeys, and we sold some hemp seed.
Okay.
So that kind of, I was doing that concurrently with my PhD. And then once I graduated, I started working at Superior Molecular, and then the edible bill passed. And I was like, I should probably, I should dabble into like using these skills and turning like manifesting this passion more in terms of this Dr. Dabs thing.
Yeah, like being more intentional.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just kind of do my own lane.
Yeah, cool. I like that. It took me a while, I feel like, to find my own lane too, but I like it here.
Right.
I don't have to really compete with too many people. I mean, I know there's other podcasts out there, but yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's cool to be able to like come onto a place and really just start breaking down stigmas. I know one of the things I'm going to ask you about later is, like what's misconceptions about weed that people still have. And I think, having these conversations and seeing people like when people watch the podcast and they see people like you, a regular cannabis consumer that's successful and healthy minded and, a go-getter, like this is a great image, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, what kind of goes into the process of innovation? How do you make sure that like your quality stays good? And talk to me about like your maple products, because I know you really love those.
Yep. So even before the Empire Genetics thing, I've got a company called Minnesota Food Forest. It still does farmers markets. So we sell our maple products there, and my aunt has honeybees, so she sells her honey there. My mom makes jams.
Nice.
So we have like a
so wholesome.
Yeah, a little mix of stuff. So I guess I originally bought this property in Taylor's Falls to grow mushrooms on logs.
Nice.
Because like in my master's, I was part of the mycology club too.
Okay.
Just out of fascination, and we did a bunch of labs where we would inoculate mushroom logs, and there's a little mushroom farm, if you will, on the St. Paul campus. And I was like, man, this is cool. I want to do this.
Yeah.
So like I inoculated these mushroom logs, and they actually lived on the side of my grandma's garage for like a year while I was trying to find a property. And then I got a property in Taylor's Falls and then put them out there. And then I was like, man, all these trees are sugar maples. I should probably figure this out.
Yeah.
So like I read every book on I think there was only one or two at the time on maple tap lines.
Okay.
And I scoured YouTube trying to figure out how to set this tube system up.
Yeah.
And then bought all the tools and was hiked, I think it was like 8 miles of tubing through the woods.
Holy shit.
And yeah, so that's kind of like the background of the maple stuff.
Cool.
But yeah, so I think a lot of my products are like, products that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, I like the creation of a product because it's like an iterative thing. Mm-hmm. Like you do like an R&D batch.
Right.
And then you're refining every step. How do I make this more efficient? How do I scale this? How do I make sure that it's consistent? What steps do I need to take? How do I even trial this to ensure consistency?
Sure.
So it's like, I viewed it as like a big puzzle.
Yeah.
And you're like trying to put all the pieces together.
I love that.
Yeah.
I especially love the innovation part, where you talk about how the products that you like and what you want to see in the market is kind of what you try to bring to life. I lost it.
But I think that like innovation could also be like two different things.
Yeah,
like
tell me.
Innovation for myself.
Yeah.
I think is really is easier because I can sit on something for a long time and think about it. Whereas if I'm making a product for somebody else, they have a timeline and they want to get to market, and they may have a wild idea. Yeah. I've worked on a product for it's like suppositories to lubes to the newest one somebody wants me to work on is THC glitter for drinks.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that at Earl Giles. They might have something like that.
Yeah. That's where they're
Nice.
So it's like Yoni from Earl Giles wants to work on he puts it on fruit, a THC glitter that could go in beverages.
Nice.
So yeah.
What about A&D Genetics? What is that?
Right now, it's kind of a defunct company.
Okay.
I think that Hempire Genetics was the one labeling that seed anyway.
Mhm.
So I think in the future, Hempire Genetics will be the company I release future seed releases out of.
Okay.
But I don't know. I left Retro Bakery. It was a company that was split up between me and Mason Alt.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's kind of done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was amicable and everything was
Yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
More or less.
What did you want to pursue then in exchange for that?
What do you mean?
Like what did you why the leave, and like were you just wanting to pursue your own things that you had going on, or
Um,
you got a lot going on. I mean,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
writing for the paper, you're down at the Capitol,
Mm.
you're out at events all the time, you're doing innovation. I know that that party that I saw you at a few months back, you were doing like a rosin gummy, which was really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know I saw you also talking about things like, adding in terps and like how terps can bring flavors to things. And is that something that you're wanting to pursue a little bit more? Just
Definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I'm hoping to have I'm doing a white label live rosin gummy for 2 different clients, and then I'll have my own that should reach the market soon here.
nice.
Uh,
Okay, cool.
mhm.
Um, what kinds of things when you are growing weed, what kinds
Sorry.
of things do you want to express? Is it different things at different times?
If I'm growing for breeding or cultivation.
Both.
Oh,
I
let me make sure this doesn't happen again.
know I've heard you talk about sometimes like growing for like to get the most yield or like the biggest yield, or now I've heard you talking about different chemovars, and I think that's really what I want to get to, because I think people really need to start understanding that, the types of chemovars and how everyone's going to come to their own place with cannabis, right? And it's not necessarily going to be a chemovar 1. It's not necessarily going to be a chemovar 3. It's probably going to be somewhere in the middle,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess for my breeding and cultivation practices is usually if I'm cultivating for myself, I grow things I like,
Okay.
kind of to bring it back to like the edible thing.
Yeah.
But so I like things with lots of Valencine in it, which makes things smell like oranges.
Yeah.
So I'm a sucker for tangies, orange cookie max, mimosas.
And what kind of feelings are that giving you?
For me, it just gives me a nice I find it to be like a clear high. I can
Mm-hmm.
think well.
Okay.
I tend to have I view my brain as like there's a dozen or 2 dozen TVs in there, and they're all at different volumes and have different things on them. And I think for me, cannabis kind of like will chill that out. And orange, things that tend to be more orange, tend to like allow me to focus better.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah, that's definitely the kind of experience I want to have as I go through and develop my own connoisseurship with cannabis. Like, what do I need to dial into that just really, really works for me? I've found a couple of things I'm like, yeah, that feels good. That's good. I like that. But I think especially, and I feel like I can do that through smoking more so than like with edibles, because it's just the effect is different. You get that like immediate effect where you're like, yeah, okay, I feel this. So yeah, it's just a really great journey. I think. What are you learning from cannabis, even day to day?
I guess lately I've been focusing a lot on these like secondary metabolites or specialized
Yeah.
metabolites. When we were at the U, I guess one of the chapter I didn't talk about in my thesis early in
Yeah.
our talk was when we did some QTL mapping for like economically important traits, trichome head size, stature of the plant, different cannabinoid traits, different terpene traits. So I think that like what's been interesting to me lately is that like we were just talking about, like how do you develop that or find that product that's best for your life way?
Yeah.
So I think that it's most interesting to kind of focus on these other constituent parts,
Right.
because it's like when you look at THC by itself, people find that uncomfortable usually.
Yeah.
It's not like a pleasurable experience.
Totally.
So it's like, it's all these other things, the little bit of CBD, a little CBG, the terpenes, the alcohols, the heteroaromatics, these
Yep.
volatile sulfur compounds. It's like, how do you maximize the best experience for you and what you need
Right.
from the plant?
Yeah. It's so individual because it's so complex,
Mhm.
Cannabis as a plant is very complex. The endocannabinoid system is so complex. And then the way it interacts with your body, another level of
Mhm.
complexity.
And that everybody's body is unique,
Yeah,
and how
exactly.
they're where their neurons are set up and how
Yeah.
those transporter systems work
Yeah.
is yeah.
There's a lot of translation that needs to happen between like what you're doing and like getting to the consumer, right? Or to the patient
Mhm.
that needs to happen. Like all that education needs to be done. So I'm glad to be in this space here doing that with you.
Yeah.
um what what are you excited for like home grow people? I feel like this is a really like we can talk shit about the bill all day, right?
Mhm.
And we
Oh,
probably will.
yep.
But like home grow was a win.
Yes, it
That
was.
was like a grand slam.
Mhm.
What are you excited about for people in their home grow and like how are you help supporting people and
I guess very early on, with Tanner and I and the Cannabis College like hosted like home grow classes.
yeah, I
So it's
remember.
cool to see, and it's cool like seeing some of these people that didn't really have any cannabis experience
Mhm.
are at the Earl Giles events and are coming to the events and being involved. It's
Yeah.
like, and it's been really cool seeing like people who didn't grow cannabis and have that relationship now grow cannabis.
Yeah.
Because it seems like, at least from that OCM report they released, about a quarter of cannabis users in Minnesota grow.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of people out there home growing cannabis.
Yeah.
And I think that one beautiful thing of it like putting like the breeder lens on is that means that there's a huge diversity of like different genetics out there and people working on different projects. And I think that's kind of beautiful. It's like,
Yeah,
it's almost like this resource,
for sure.
especially because when I go to these events, some old heads will always come up to me and, oh, I've got this Hindu Kush I got back from a buddy who traveled over there, and I've been maintaining it for however long. And
Yeah.
it's cool that there's like these pockets of resources of cannabis.
Totally. I love
Uh,
that. I love to see people growing their own medicine. That's how it should be.
mhm,
Just like we should be growing our own food, we can be growing our own medicine too, even alluding to, you know, inoculating spores.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, and the other thing I really like is the communities that it's building. I see people like Jude doing his home grow community, Bob out at Canajoy doing theirs. I feel like the guild as a collective is really doing a lot to support home grow and then to have like that little testing component that they have, that's nice too. And people can kind of dial into where they're at with their weed. And yeah, it's awesome. I think that's the best part. Give a couple of tips, like give like some pro tips from from the master, the PhD,
Uh,
as to people that are growing their own cannabis.
one of my favorite pro tips to give to people is get a jeweler's loop. So a jeweler's loop allows you to look at the trichome heads and see where they are at in development. I think that's a very important and very cheap tool to figure out when you're ready to harvest.
Yeah.
If you don't have a jeweler's loop, I think the easiest way to talk about when to harvest is when those stigmas turn from white to orange or brown.
Yeah.
But I think the jeweler's loop gives you a bit more power, because not everything finishes. A pack of seeds may say it finishes in 8 weeks, and
Right.
maybe it's actually 10 or 11.
Yeah.
So I think that's just having more data can help you make better medicine.
Someone told me you have to harvest it when it's like just starting to bend, like where it looks like it's gonna break, like it's heavy,
Hmm.
but it's like doesn't break off. So yeah. But what a beautiful thing too for people to be developing that, and to like learn that whole process and go through that. So zen. And I like that. I tried once to like pop some seeds and it didn't go well after that. So I'm gonna try again this year though. I'm gonna do it with clones, I think.
Yeah, I think you
So
should. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm gonna go outdoor just in a pot because I live in a townhouse. So
Mhm.
I don't have a big space to grow. But yeah, I'm gonna give it a shot.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Want
And
to?
I think another um I guess another tip I would say for home growers is that to have some sort of pH meter,
Hmm.
because I think that we think of, at least for outdoor cannabis, it's easy. The rain is watering it, but at home you have a bit more control indoors.
Yeah.
And I don't know about everybody, but my water comes out very basic.
Yeah.
I'm probably like 8.4.
Okay.
So I think that like being able to dial in the pH, I think will take a lot of people to that next level.
Yeah.
They'll avoid a lot of nutrient lockout, some salt buildup.
So many nuances. Yeah.
There is, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like every facet.
Where's a good resource that people can go to, like if they're growing and they're like have a question? Like, does the U have a good site where you can?
I don't even
That's your
think
next
so.
project.
Yeah, that's the next project. Or yeah, I think it'd be cool to get a better resource live and for free on the Cannabis College
Yeah.
website. But I think outside of that, I know there's some good Reddit pages that I'm forgetting right now.
Okay,
There's a
cool.
couple good Minnesota groups out there. I think that another good place that you had mentioned earlier is the Bob's Cannajoy.
Yeah.
Checking out Cannajoy, and just asking questions to the people there.
Yeah, for sure.
Another good place is Zoe at Eco Garden. I think a lot of the grocery stores, Greener Goods. I think you can walk in there and ask some questions and get some good answers.
Yeah.
I know at least for Zoe, he's a legacy guy. He's got probably a couple decades of experience. I think it's just like finding those gems, and I think that at least on the side for those people is like they want to see you succeed because your success is their success.
Yeah.
And,
it makes them happy, I'm sure. If they can tap into their passion, then so can you.
mhm.
Okay, so our current industry.
Uh-oh.
Give me a hot take on it. Where do you think it's at? Like, what are we doing here?
I think we're dragging our feet.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
I think things are now finally starting to happen.
How do you feel about the rules that are finalized now? I know there's been a couple of pain points in them.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pain points for like the small craft grower, like a Firebeard, or like a Green Machine, is that like some folks are making like really refined value-added products, and the yield on rosin is low, like 3% or less return. So if you have to come up with 60 grams for a test sample, that can be that's a lot of money.
Sure it is.
Especially if you want to, I mean, there's going to be ways that they can work around that. Might have to have successive grows and pool it together. But I think it does stifle innovation and product access. Because now now you have to grow things in much larger batches. You can't have small craft things or try new things at a small scale.
So I've heard you kind of allude to like, where did that come from? How does this go through? If the sentiment of the bill was to honor the small craft grower and the small business person, what does that serving us then?
Yeah, because it's very questionable because it wasn't in the first two iterations of those rules, and then so clearly, if Tobble is confirming what rules end up in what rules are in our rule book, I guess. It's just like, where did it come? What conversation?
Right. Why did that suddenly become important?
Yeah. Why did that become important? Who was he talking to? And like, how do you buy the rules?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, I don't know. I think that small growers and small business owners, I think we need to kind of band together.
Okay.
I think we're in this weird moment. We're in our market's infancy.
Yep.
And we saw with, HF 2426, that big money and interest is at least able to buy bills. They were, fortunately for us, that they weren't successful in passing it.
Right.
But now we see new things pop up in these rules.
Right.
And there's going to be a cannabis omnibus bill that comes up. So like, what's going to get snuck in there?
Right.
So I think that we just need to, we don't need to work in like some sort of cabal or like we have to be in the same crew or something, but we all have the same interests.
Right.
So I think that if we just exercise our interests in a political manner, like staying on top of our Congress and senator. So when HF 2426 came out, I made sure to write my senator, and we emailed back and forth about it.
Right.
And then they pointed me in the direction of other people to talk to.
Sure.
And then I testified and gave my opinion. So I think it's just like making sure to stay on top of it.
For sure.
Because I think for this one, we just were, I don't know. I didn't think that bill was going to come up. I wasn't prepared for it. So I think this next time around, I think that we should have some amount of preparedness.
There was such a long, hard fight to just get adult rec legalized. And I think once that happened, people were like, huh. But there was sounding alarms going on before that. People like Michael Ford were coming forward. People like Jeff Brinkman were coming forward saying, hey, this really isn't going to be great for, small business people.
Mm-hmm.
So, or, like, where is the social justice piece of this? Like, don't let that get lost. And so, we do. These are elected officials. We have to hold their feet to the fire, because if we don't, nobody else will. And then people with money will sweep in and, like you said, buy the rules or buy the bill or whatever it is. So yeah, I mean, banding together certainly is one of the things that has to happen, and lobbying your own elected officials is that second piece of it too. So yeah, super important work. What are some of the other pain points that have come up after seeing the rules?
One of them that I saw that got scratched out is that sampling piece, like not being able to like give samples out at events.
Yeah.
That was scratched out, which was nice. What's another pain point? I made a little infographic about it. Let's see.
Well, I know there's been a lot of talk about percentages and, people being able to access the medicine that they need, and, like the concentrate percentages not being high enough. And so.
Yeah, I think another big one is if track and trace, it looks like they're going with metric.
Okay.
I don't think that's been set in stone yet, but the track and trace software, if it goes down, there are no sales. Mm-hmm. So that can be a big pain point, because in other states it's gone down for hours.
Sure.
Or in some cases, I think a couple of days.
Well, and you can see already, like, people are just like jawing at the bit to like get into dispensaries and be able to buy their weed. And I could see how that could very easily happen within the first, day, honestly. So yeah, it's a tough one. What else? What would the OCM under the leadership of Clemon Dabney look like?
We'd have cannabis right now. I'll tell you that much.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. I guess under my leadership, I would have stayed true to what the bill says. Is that the OCM's job is to create and foster essentially a craft industry.
Yeah.
So I think what they would have gotten with me is transparency. I would work with the various stakeholders, i.e., small and large business, medical companies, right. Elected officials, as well as other government departments, to craft a solid program. Sure. And I think that right now it doesn't feel like, at least, that they are listening to small business or reaching out to them.
Sure.
Because we keep getting sprung by bad rulemaking and bad laws.
And the whole debacle with the social equity thing and the lottery, and like, that was what?
Yeah. And I think they're even still kind of at risk, because if they have to hold that lottery, some people change their decisions based on that. So they might have pulled out of social equity to put themselves in a lottery, right, and change their chance. And I think that opens them up to litigation, and it could potentially slow the rollout even more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Were you all prepared? Like, I talked to Erin on the show, and she was saying how, like, she had her whole business plan built up and she was ready to roll it out. And like, did you have kind of a plan in place as to like, okay, these are the steps I think that are really important, and what were those pillars?
For me, it was, since I'm a small business, it's like finding people that I can either collaborate with or who want to buy into Doc Dabs. And so I was fortunate enough to find a good partner for the dispensary side. So it's the Heinz's, Dusty and Colty from the Agrarian Nursery.
Nice.
So we're pretty close to the airport, and they've got a nursery business that's already there in 2 structures. So I think that the nursery will move into the other structure, and then the dispensary will be in what is now their nursery.
Hopefully they'll give Bachman's a run for their money.
Let's hope so.
That's what I want to see.
But I think that it's like being able to do something cool, because I think there's a nice little outdoor space for a little sesh lounge. You're gonna be able to sesh among the plants.
Yeah, I love that.
It's a cool part of town.
Yeah.
And I think I found good partners for that.
That's good. It's good to have good people around you. That's like critical, I think, to success. What are some of the real positives that you've seen come out of the rules and the law?
I think the real positives are as the number of people that applied. What is it? 3,500. Most of them being small business. So I think the wealth generation of possibility, I think, is the most beautiful part of it. Is like the bill allows people the ability to follow their passions.
Yeah.
And we talked about, it could be, video editing to production to marketing. It's just opening up a whole new industry and giving people jobs and being able to support their families and communities. I think that's the most powerful thing about all of this.
How do you pivot now after? So, I mean, I know you've moved on from that whole thing with the OCM. I feel like, people were really kind of devastated, Clem, that you didn't get it. I think we're like, what? This makes so much sense. Why didn't this happen? And I think people were just kind of in shock and awe, because it just was seemed like such a natural fit, How did you just pivot away from that and just pour into what you're doing? And how do you then become the voice of this industry now? You're writing for the paper. You've got some really insightful things in there, and just some really deep personal things too, reflections on that. So talk a little bit about that and what that journey's been like.
Yeah. So I think for me, it just kind of lit a fire under me.
I bet.
So it's and I think it also, kind of it worked in my favor, I think, as well. Because I think that it opened me, it at least brought my brand to people who didn't necessarily know me before that.
Gotcha.
And let people know kind of what's going on in the Minnesota cannabis politics scene.
Yeah.
So it just allowed me to hone my focus and find opportunities that I'm passionate about. And I think that it's kind of how I pivoted is I'm throwing a lot more into Dr. Dabs. We're Dr. Dabs full time now. I get a write for the Star Tribune. And I think that everybody at OCM knows my name.
Yeah,
now.
right.
So I don't know. That also gives
state.
me a little bit more access to them, and maybe even credibility or something. To feel free to speak my truth to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to the lawmakers.
Yep.
Yeah, that was really impassioned what you said, speaking for the bill, or against it. So your voice for the Strib. What do you want to convey with it? You have your own personal take on things. I've heard you talk about this push-pull that you feel between you've been the director for the Native American, which one was it? Tell me. The Red Lake.
Yep.
You've been the medical director for Red Lake, and you've talked about your lineage, your Choctaw lineage, and having this balance of how do we support Indigenous people and make sure the rest of the social equity people are also elevated to those spaces. How do we balance that out?
I think it's really hard, and I think even those conversations are really hard.
Yeah, they are.
Because it's they got served a bad deal in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Up until the 70s.
Yeah.
So it's just my mom was born in 69, so when she was born, horrible things were still happening.
Right.
So it's like I don't think that I don't know. I grapple with it still. It's hard to
Yeah,
talk about. So
sure.
it's like, how do we make sure that they're geared for success and economic prosperity, but making sure that the playing field also doesn't come at a cost of others, I guess,
Yeah.
that have also faced hardship.
Mhm.
Um,
From the war on drugs.
yeah, through the war
Yeah.
on drugs. Yeah.
And also, I feel like we also need to do things that are sustainable for the industry. Like, I feel like they're building these huge facilities, and I'm like, I don't know, is this really what we need?
Hmm.
You know? So, you know, I would love to see. That's why I talked earlier about the industrial hemp, because can't we shift our mindset a little bit and maybe, move into these other industries where we could really bolster the economy in Minnesota by doing other things in cannabis?
Hmm.
So I don't know. I just wish people would just think outside the box sometimes. It doesn't have to be this big, sexy, like, oh, we're smoking cannabis and we're gonna have a lounge and, a dispo and all this. So I don't know. Just a reflection that I had.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. It's like there's so many opportunities where big money could spend and still make big money.
Mm.
There's just so many I mean, it takes, there's risk there,
Yeah.
but I think that there are still completely untapped marketplaces. Like in Europe, they do a lot of hemp composite parts.
Hmm.
We don't do that.
Yeah.
If you set up that supply chain, which is what you're going to have to do, is go from production of plant, even controlling the seed so you can have seed reasonably at a reasonable price. Because that's a problem for fiber farmers, is seed is expensive. But like being able to control, basically create a vertically integrated market space with the end product in mind. Because
Yeah.
I think that, Tesla, or not that that's a great company at this point, but
Right.
Ford or Chevrolet or some car company is going to invest in putting those parts in their car because it's novel.
Yeah.
And then they can say that it's more sustainable than using something that was plastic.
Right.
Um,
Well, and
so
it wouldn't be a lie.
yeah. Hmm.
What are some of your personal missions for our industry? Like, how do you want to make your mark? Other than what you've already done, you're an award-winning, innovator. You've won several awards for Legacy Cup. You're this great leader and advocate. What else do you want to do? What else? What else is there?
I think that I've got a lot more work to do on the breeding side of things.
Okay.
So we kind of talked about earlier, like what constituent parts make up the cannabis as like a medicine or even a recreational drug.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of work to do in the non-terpene space and even the terpene space, because there are no published markers yet for terpene production. One of my papers like alludes to it. So I think that there's an ability for somebody to develop a marker pretty quickly if they read one of my thesis chapters. But I think that like creating more markers for these volatile sulfur compounds, I think where I want to leave my mark is like creating these chemovars for specific end uses.
Okay.
Do you have problems with inflammation? This is your cultivar.
Right.
Do you need help sleeping? This is your cultivar. I think that's where I'd want to make my greatest like splash, is like kind of creating the Honey Crisp and Sweet Tango,
Sure.
but for cannabis, and bring it to the general public.
I love that.
I think it's like a dual-edged thing, is that like I don't think people completely understand, because I think a lot of consumers are like, I need numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I want 50% THC flower.
Yeah, right.
But I don't, that might not be what they actually want.
Right.
They just don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like we can bring it back to maple syrup. When you blind taste test people choose dark amber maple syrup.
Mm-hmm.
But when they can look at it and see it, they choose light fancy.
Interesting.
So they choose this light syrup with less taste when they look at it.
Interesting.
But when they just taste it, they choose something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think your research is so important because it's more of like that concrete foundational work. And I feel like, the the research that I typically like learn from and study from and think about is more like survey stuff, like how did this make you feel type stuff, just because we have that restriction of cannabis still being federally legal, Schedule 1, and I think once that gets lifted, of course that will open up, but like the research that you can do is just so much more concrete because it's not focused on people. So, that foundational work is really needed. And I applaud people like you that's doing that, people like Matt Robidoux. This is really great work and it's coming right out of our state. So to me, that's awesome. Yeah.
I think we're poised because the bill had language in there that is going to give money to the university to study cannabis.
Yeah, I saw that.
So I think that will keep, at least, I think it'll keep Minnesota on the forefront.
Yeah.
Of
Do you have people on your heels? Do you and Matt have people on your heels that are just like dying to like do, cannabis research too? I mean, I hope so.
Yeah. So I know that George is taking on a new student in the fall.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So in 5.5 years, there'll be another Dr. Cannabis. I haven't met her yet, but it sounds like she's pretty brilliant.
Oh, sweet. And it's a woman.
It's a woman.
What? Okay, girl.
Shout out Minnesota.
Hey. All over the place. All right, well, let's get back to those myths about cannabis. Like, what are some of the big myths about cannabis that people think, and what's the truth?
Yeah, so I think the biggest myth that causes me the most flack online is Indica sativa.
Yeah.
So like when you look genetically speaking at groups of plants labeled indica and groups of plants labeled sativa, there's no genetic differentiation.
Okay.
And then when let's say you start looking at chemical differentiation, there's very, very weak correlatory data supporting at least a terpene difference in indica versus sativa.
Where's the difference coming from then?
I think it's I think it's largely that there is some amount of difference. So there's like some terpinolene and myrcene correlations, but correlation is not causation.
Right.
So I think that there's something there.
Okay.
But I don't necessarily think it's this indica sativa thing.
Gotcha.
I think we've been talking about, how all these different chemical compounds kind of like add together to give you the user experience.
Yep.
So I think that what indica and sativa were really trying to explain is that these specific chemical compounds are providing these feelings.
Right.
And it's not necessarily this label, indica or sativa.
Yeah.
Because there's just been so much crossbreeding, and even the origin of the etymology of cannabis indica was largely like a scientist's ploy, really, to make cannabis legal. Because what's scheduled is cannabis sativa L and all parts therein, yada yada.
Right.
So it's cannabis sativa is the illegal plant. So if we make this new plant, this whole new species, cannabis indica.
Okay, got you.
We could then have cannabis again.
Okay, got you.
Though they all are interfertile with each other. And, yeah. So I think largely this indica sativa are like a colloquialism. They're like words that we use to describe an effect. Though I do think that probably in the next 10 years we're gonna have probably better words.
I think so too. I think we really need to put importance on that lexicon. I think, saying indica and saying sativa is just an easy way for like the layman to understand like, yep, this one's going to give me a head high. This one's going to make me go to sleep, so it's easy for them to differentiate that. But like you hear people say all the time, most cannabis is a hybrid. So I would really love to see like strain names going away and people focusing in on COAs and like what is actually in this plant right here. Exactly. What is this plant going to provide you? And so, I think testing is really important. And I think once people know what they need to dial into, then they can go look for those things in the dispensary. So there needs to be that education piece again, where like people understand that. Like I can't just look for sativa. I maybe need to look for like, I don't know, linalool or whatever it might be that's going to give me a good head high.
Exactly. And I think that, even for here's a shout out for one of these web creator types.
Mhm.
Maybe the first person who starts putting all that data in a centralized spot and connects it with dispensaries, that's probably a powerful tool.
Yeah, I think there actually might be someone doing something like that out in San Francisco, John Talleyrand. Have you ever
Cool.
heard of him?
No,
Yeah, you should check him out. He's doing some terpene stuff where they're doing like markers and like how do you feel kind of thing and like labeling it up with a color or something like that. I'll send you his info,
yeah,
but
that'd be cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
What other types of research projects are you kind of dialed into right now that you're interested in?
Right now, I've been actually pitching some research to the U, and reaching out to industry to fund it.
Okay.
But right now, I would love to do more plant breeding work, but I just don't think there is. So here, let's go backward. Research gets done because industry funds it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because they want something to give to people.
Yep. So right now, the things I really want to do, there really isn't funding for.
Mm,
But I do think that I'm still passionate about making the plant more sustainable. So I do think that there's some like value added work in terms of like how do you ensure like post harvest handling? How do you lengthen the life of a product, and how do you make sure that it stays quality over that lifespan? And I also think that there's some research in light spectrum and under canopy lights that would be cool to be more contemporary.
okay.
That I think that there's good potential that I could get into. So if any viewers want to contribut to some research at the university,
There you
let
go.
me know. My
Any
shameless
big
plug.
donators out
Yeah.
there?
But yeah, so I think that because I think that a lot of people think that like they see hemp and then kind of conflate hemp with recreational cannabis,
Mhm.
and like recreational cannabis is not very sustainable.
Mm,
Where hemp is more sustainable, I guess.
sure. You mean like it breaks down more easily,
No,
or
it's just that it requires incredible energy
gotcha,
to make high quality flower.
gotcha.
Lights, like just like so let's just talk about like a micro license. Let's just assume you had one plant per square foot. This is just spitballing numbers. It's
Mhm.
not what most people do,
Yeah.
but you've got 5,000 plants, and they each feed half a gallon of water or quarter gallon. That's 1,250 to 2,500 gallons of water.
Mm.
They're transpiring that probably within a day's period of time. That's a lot of moisture in the air.
Yeah.
That requires energy to remove that moisture.
Right.
They need light. Since they're inside, you got to provide them light. That's a bunch of energy.
Mhm.
So I think that like high quality indoor cannabis is just kind of, it takes a lot of inputs.
Does that mean that you prefer to grow your cannabis outside?
I don't think not necessarily. I do like growing cannabis outside,
Okay.
but I also like high quality indoor cannabis.
Gotcha.
But I think that I just think that we, as like an industry, need to support how do we do it better?
Yeah.
How do we extend the length of the products in terms of shelf life? How do we produce the same gram of flour cheaper? Because
Right.
cheaper means less inputs.
Right.
It's like how do we make this thing that we love better and more sustainable
And consistent, I
And
think
yep.
too, so that people know if they've, been accessing this and this is what works. Okay, and I can go back to that and I'm going to get the same effect every time.
hmm
So, yeah, it's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some other challenges that the industry is going to face coming up, do you think, when adult rec goes live?
I think that of course it'll be the original. What were they using in production shortfall or whatever? But it's just because plants take time to grow.
Yeah.
Like just because store A has a license, let's just call it June 1.
Mm-hmm.
It's still It's still 2 or 3 months realistically away
Yeah.
before that store will have product,
Right.
and then it's just going to be a run on the bank. I can buy weed now,
Right.
and everybody and their brother is going to go do it.
Yeah.
So I think that originally there will be a shortfall, but it appears that the number of licenses appears that it'll saturate the Minnesota market space.
Mm.
So I think that short term,
But they're only allowing a certain number of dispos, right? Like 3D2 or something like that. Wasn't that like a magic number?
I'd have to look back into
Okay,
that.
yeah.
'Cause
Not to put you on the spot, but I thought there was gonna be, like, a limited number.
Yeah, but I guess even then, that would create a market problem.
Mhm.
Um,
For sure.
so
Well,
I think that's what the main problem is in the infancy of this market is there's gonna be market problems.
yeah, right.
Is that like eventually, there's this production. If you can supply more than there's demand, price
Yeah.
crashes.
Well,
If there isn't supply, like what will happen at the beginning is like people are going to overpay for their medicine or
right.
drugs, and um, so I guess people who are early movers are going to benefit because price will be high.
But again, that takes money, like here's these people like waiting and waiting and waiting. It's like they have their space rented and they have to pay rent on that and they have to, set up all the other infrastructures of their business, like their safety plan and their sales point of sales and all that
Mhm.
stuff. And it's just that must be
And it's not
such
very clear
yeah,
because even
still.
even in the rules, I was like reading through the rules. I'm like, because we're trying to figure out, like, do we have to have a vestibule?
Mhm.
Do we have to have product behind a cage?
Right.
And like is uncertain. Like there's not really clear guidance.
I feel like most of the
Um,
markets, though, it's like that, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
you
yeah.
think they would follow suit, kind of. But like
Mhm.
you go into a dispo in like Denver, it's pretty. I mean, it's like a glass case. You know what I
Yep,
mean? It doesn't feel like behind lock and key type shit. But
yep.
yeah,
Yeah, because I think in Vegas they didn't have. You just walk in. Well, Cookies did, but there was one by MJ BizCon that you just kind of walked in.
mm,
Yeah, so it's like, what style are they looking for?
yeah. What do you think of Lucky Leaf? Speaking of events, what do you think of Lucky Leaf this year?
Oh,
You did the panel, and you were on there with some really incredible people, and
I thought it was cool.
yeah,
Yeah, I think the panel I was on was fun. I got to talk with Stefan and
yeah,
Bryant,
Bryant,
and
yeah,
so I think we had a nice representation of production for the people who wanted to come check that class out.
yeah.
Um, I thought it was a good like networking opportunity, good place to find a potential bank to work with,
Yeah, for
or
sure.
find a point of sale, find security cameras, find other people who are in the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very different from like a legacy type of an event, right?
Oh
Where
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember what year was this? It was like right before COVID. I flew to MJ BizCon,
Mm,
and then I flew from there to the Emerald Cup. And
nice.
it's just like seeing the Emerald Cup at the time, at least, was like it was like a conference meets a music festival meets a weed farmers market. So
That's
you could I got to
awesome.
see the Flatbush Zombies and smoke some orange creamsicle out in public, and
Yeah.
I got to watch what is his name? I'm gonna forget, but he writes really good cannabis like
Okay.
how-to books.
Okay.
Um,
Cushman? Kyle Cushman?
wasn't
Mm,
Cushman? Oh, that's bugging me, but
that's
yeah.
okay.
Um,
Well, I'm kind of excited
uh,
that we're not going to have the dispos open this summer because that just means better parties.
right, right. Yeah, where we can actually sample product.
Yeah.
Um,
I really enjoy the OG market and going to the underground parties. I think,
me too.
it's always a good vibe. People are, positive and they just want to have a good time and like listen to
Mhm,
music, smoke their weed, have something to eat. So,
mhm.
it's a nice place to meet someone if you have needs going forward. And yeah, so I enjoy that scene quite a bit.
Me too. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's cool seeing the juxtaposition too. I like I know it's gonna be something cool when they're like location TBD.
Exactly.
I'm like, I will wait.
And then they send you a text like an hour before.
Mhm.
And you're like, are these people gonna come through?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yes, they do.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's really fun.
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to this weekend. There's gonna be lots of things going on for 420.
I'm excited as well. There's so
Yeah.
much stuff all around the state.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
That's one thing that I always worry about a little bit is just the rest of the state. I feel like they don't have access to cannabis like we do here. I mean, of course, they've been accessing it in their special way that they have been for, decades, but for people that maybe want to access a medical product or a hemp derived product because I don't think that market's going anywhere either.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
A lot of
because
people say so, but I don't.
I don't think so. I think the drinks are pretty solid,
Drinks are solid for
so
sure.
they're not going to go anywhere. And I don't know the answer to this, but is the production of like THC drinks then? Is it different than hemp and like the sustainability of it? Yeah, it's harder, right?
I think it's almost the same.
Okay, it is.
Because it's like you're just putting a water soluble product in whatever liquid.
Got
I
it.
guess water soluble is a misnomer. An
Okay,
emulsion into a liquid.
gotcha.
Um, I think that it's much more efficient, I guess, to get it from cannabis than it
Sure.
is from hemp. But I think it's cheaper getting it from hemp
Mm-hmm.
because it can be grown at its unlimited scale,
Yeah,
essentially.
right. Well, and
Um,
people want to be able to access that low dose spot there,
mhm,
that's the entry point for some folks, and then to be able to like stack it. So if they
yep,
want to like, have a good time all day long,
mhm.
just small little doses, it's nice.
And I think culturally too. Like I
Yeah.
think that like my aunt, she'll never be caught dead in a dispensary.
Yeah.
But will she go to the co-op and get a drink for sure?
Yeah.
But giving her ID to somebody and waiting, I just don't think that's her style.
You don't think she'll ever break it
Ever,
down?
not ever.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I think that there's those people out there too.
Mm.
It's like somebody who doesn't feel comfortable giving up their ID and getting tracked,
Yeah.
and um,
I think it's
I
going
don't
to
know.
be an overwhelming experience for people that have never done it too. I
Mm.
remember the first few times I went into a dispensary, I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Like
There's a guy with
you
a
walk
gun.
in, yeah, you walk in, you're like, okay, what do I do?
Mhm.
So I think some places do a nice job though. I went to like Island Passy,
Yep, yep.
and they have, your personal shopper meets you at the door after you show them your ID. They take you through, show you the products, help you out. So, there is going to have to be some type of like a concierge,
Yep.
element to it. I hope that there is anyway.
Mhm.
So yeah. Something else I wanted to ask you about. Shit. Do you have any final thoughts?
I'll do a shameless plug.
Yeah, do it.
Since it's 5:30 now, one of my stories just went live,
Oh,
or
sweet.
articles
Okay.
in the Star Tribune.
Tell me about
it's
it.
it's about the history of 420 and what's
Awesome.
going on here in
Okay.
Minnesota.
Okay. Give us a little sneak preview.
So the what they think. I'm sorry.
Someone's
Apparently I'm
lost.
lost. So there was a group of kids in California. They called themselves the Waldos,
Yes.
and they would meet at a statue of Louis Pasteur, the chemist.
Okay.
And they used the term 420 because they would meet there at 420.
Okay.
And then eventually the term kind of evolved into, hey, let's smoke it. Let's 420.
Yeah.
And that one of the Waldos was a roadie for I think it's the guitarist of the Grateful Dead.
Okay, cool.
And then the Grateful Dead kind of popularized it in North America.
Okay.
It kind of evolved into like this kind of like silent act of protest. People would go to the Capitol stairs and smoke weed on 420
Yeah.
on April 20th. So I think it evolved into a word of like, hey, let's sesh. So it's almost this international like act of defiance, and
Nice.
and now it's like Christmas for cannabis consumers.
Yeah.
And then the article kind of ends is like where are cool things happening. So it's like the hook and, like we talked about off air, the hook and ladders doing some fun stuff.
Yeah.
Cannabis bingo and egg hunts and a fashion show and comedy, and Modest is doing like their 9-year anniversary. Surly's doing like this gourmet munchies event.
Nice.
There's even like a group of bikers from the Bike Alliance doing like a bike race, kind of like a beer marathon where
cool.
where you run and then drink a beer and run some more. There's going to be like you bike around and stop and
awesome.
and consume cannabis, then ride around some more.
That's cool.
What's another cool one? I saw like a wind down sauna session that Canna Connect's doing. There's the Familia skate shop. There's going to be like a barbecue and skate competition. I know that most of Island Pezzy, Sweetest Grass, and Native Care are all hosting some form of events.
Nice.
I know that I'm pretty sure Ben Paddle has something going on, music and a gathering. So there's just like really cool events.
Yeah.
And I think it's cool to see like cannabis is almost like Well, cannabis is cool in that like it was one of the first domesticated crops,
Mhm.
and it like spread around the world so fast, and people utilized it so thoroughly that like there is no like progenitor species. Like in corn, there's the original species corn came from still exists out there, but for cannabis it doesn't. So it's like I think that the like cannabis is like this expression of everyone.
Sure.
So there's like all this cool stuff being done by all these different groups. It's like, what are you interested in? Or
Yeah.
even like a comet, like I think it's TWG
The
comedy.
Warriors Garden,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're doing a cannabis comedy show. So it's just like, what are you interested in?
Mhm.
There's something going on for
Yeah.
you.
And cannabis can be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I saw a woman on Instagram, Riley Kirk. She wrote a really great book recently. She's a cannabis scientist. She talked about how when she went to go do her headshots, there was like, she went to a studio and it was like clearly no smoking signs. And so she was like feeling kind of nervous, like she didn't pregame well enough, you know? And she was like, you know, why do we have to think about when she started talking to the guy who owned the studio and he was like, "Oh, go ahead and smoke, you know, no problem." So like she got into this whole rolling it up and smoking. She started to kind of let loose and like, you know, she had a really great headshot experience. And her thoughts were, you know, why does cannabis always have to be thought of as like we can only use it as, you know, for pain, sleep and pain, sleep, and anxiety? You know, why do we have to put it into a bucket hole? Why isn't it okay for there to be images of people rolling up cannabis, smoking cannabis, enjoying cannabis, and like really living their best lives with it, you know, versus like seeing a beer commercial, you know, like these images should be equivalent, if not elevated, because, you know, it's so much healthier for you.
Yep.
So I really love to see images of people smoking and being in community with each other and enjoying cannabis, because you're not going to see, you know, people falling down, you know, drunk or passed out. They're not going to be, you know, jumping off buildings or things like that. You know,
Fighting each
they might
other.
be like getting a big puff of weed smoke from like a cannon or like under the canopy,
Yep.
but like they're still gonna come out and be okay.
Yep.
So yeah, I just really want to help promote those images of people like having a good time with cannabis and like everything's okay,
Yep.
you know. So
Yeah, I think that's one big space that we could work on in our industry is like
yeah,
how do we communicate that to
yeah,
the general audience without cannabis experience?
for sure.
Uh,
Yeah, because I think they have that image of like who smokes cannabis and what cannabis is until they try it, and it will maybe prevent them from trying it, you know,
mhm.
which is sad. But any other final thoughts?
Uh, no, I think we covered a
It.
lot
We
today.
covered
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see you out at some places this weekend.
Mhm.
Yeah, to get into it. Thank you again for being here and for
Thank you,
sharing
thank you for
your
having me.
story, your insights on the industry, and just your general knowledge. I really appreciate it. It's been great getting to know you.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
So
thanks for having
yeah.
me. This was great.
So that's it for Conversations with Kush tonight. Please remember to like, share, comment, subscribe on the platform, on the YouTube platform, and also any of the podcast platforms that you can listen to on audio. Make sure to interact with the platform too. And I've always tried to like answer questions back. So if you have any follow-up questions for Clem, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer some. So thanks again. Have a great night.